Hi, I'm Shanea Leven. I'm the founder and CEO of CodeSee. We're a developer tool that helps development teams visually understand how their code works.
Awesome. So why did you start CodeSee in the first place?
So I started it out of my own just work experience. I was a senior director of product at Docker, and like most product people, we were trying to get a feature out the door. And 2 days before the launch, there was this bug that me and my engineers are trying to figure out, like how this bug worked. And turns out that Docker had gone through a lot of attrition at that time. And there was no one left at the company that understood how that area of the code base worked. And so basically, after some freaking out and some obscenities yelled, I basically kind of yelled out in desperation, like, why do we not understand our code? Because that wasn't the first or second or third time that had happened to me in my career. It's a pretty common experience. And that's how CodeSee was born.
When you had that problem, right, and you sort of said, like, okay, this is a real problem, right? What actually gave you the sort of thought process to be like, oh, well, I should start a company around this? Like, because there's a jump from there's a problem here to I need to start a company.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did what any product person would do. I talked to a bunch of people. I talked to a bunch of other engineers. I talked to a bunch of other friends of mine. I talked to a bunch of, places at companies. And I had this own personal experience at many of my companies that I worked at for many, many years. It was just the first time I had such a visceral reaction to it. And every person that I talked to was like, oh yeah, that's such a problem. And still, even today, people are like, oh yeah, that's such a problem. Really validating that experience. And it wasn't until I actually read in a few research papers that because CodeSee was actually supposed to be a education, like a course, like a visual course to learn to code. I read these research papers that basically said that we had been trying to understand our code in the same way for the last 50 years. It hasn't changed. And we can do all of these amazing things with technology. We can detect cancer, and we can do semantic analysis of all of these different things, like crazy things. And yet the way that we still read and understand code, reading it line by line and building it up in our head, has not changed since punch card days.
Again, you then get conviction that this is a real problem, right? That this is something. And then still you have that moment, right? Because this was the first company you started, or?
So I started a web development and social media company. I'm going to dig back in the day in 2008, 9. But this was my first venture-backed company. And I actually started doing the research and the product development process on nights and weekends. So I was at the time VP of product at another developer startup. And so the plan was for just me to understand the market, understand what users need, build it on the side in my copious spare time. And hopefully we can help some people with that and then kind of go on our merry way. But that didn't actually happen in the way that, so I was supposed to start this company with some friends of mine from Docker. And then the pandemic happened. And one ended up staying at Docker and one ended up going to a different company. And I ended up just kind of still noodling around. I was really excited to solve this problem. And I kept bouncing ideas off of the engineer that lives in my house, my husband. And so by the time we ended up figuring out and doing research and kind of spitballing some ideas, we ended up hiring a contractor, an engineering contractor, to kind of build a first prototype while we both still had full-time jobs. To kind of get it out and test it. And I was doing all of talking to engineers on the side, kind of doing that product development process. And then only after we had our first prototype built and we had a bunch of signups, that people were like, okay, maybe we'll give you some money to really, really do this thing.